My name's Laura, and I'm the younger of two sisters in what you might call a blended family. But blended implies some kind of harmony, and let me tell you, there wasn't much of that growing up. My mom had been married before, to some guy who died when my half-sister was 5. Then she met my dad, they got hitched, and pop. Out I came a year later. Sounds like a neat little package, right? Wrong. See, my mom had this house she inherited from her first husband. Nice place, nothing too fancy. She also owned a sewing factory. After she and my dad tied the knot, she asked him to help run the business. They made a good team, I'll give him that. Dad handled the money stuff, Mom took care of making things and dealing with people. They doubled the company's profits in no time. I remember overhearing them talk about the future once when I was little. They were in the kitchen, thinking I was asleep. I hope the girls will take over someday, Mom said. Keep it in the family, you know? Dad agreed. That'd be great. Laura's got a good eye for design already. And Sarah's sharp with numbers. Little did they know, Sarah had other ideas. My dear half-sister never let me forget that everything, the house, the business, even the damn spoons we ate with, belonged to her and Mom. This is my house, she'd say, blocking the door to her room. You're just living in it, 'cause your dad mooches off Mom. I was too young to understand why she was so mean. I just wanted to play with her cool toys or borrow a pencil to draw. But every time I touched something, she'd snatch it away. That's mine, she'd screech. My real dad bought it before he died. You can't have it. Mom tried to stop her. Sarah, honey, that's not nice. Laura's your sister. Half-sister, Sarah would spit back. And she gets everything. It's not fair. Dad never said much during these fights. He'd just pat my head and tell me to ignore her. But how could I? She made my life hell. One day, I found some colored pencils in the living room. I was so excited, finally, I could draw the beautiful dresses I saw in my head. I started sketching, lost in my own little world. Then Sarah stormed in. Those are mine, she yelled, grabbing the pencils. Before I could stop her, she tore up my drawings. I ran to Mom, sobbing. She hugged me tight and marched over to Sarah's room. That's enough, I heard her shout. You will not treat your sister this way. But nothing changed. Sarah kept finding ways to remind me I didn't belong. And as we got older, it only got worse. As we grew older, my parents tried their best to keep the peace. They'd buy us the same clothes, give us equal gifts on holidays. But it was never enough for Sarah. Laura's sweater is softer, she'd complain. Or, her necklace has more jewels. You always give her the best stuff. It didn't matter that it wasn't true. In Sarah's mind, I was the favorite, the interloper stealing her rightful place. When I was about 10, my parents decided to sell the old house and buy a bigger one. I remember the day we moved in, how excited I was to have my own room. This is amazing, I squealed, twirling around the empty space. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her face dark. Don't get too comfortable. This house belongs to me and Mom. You're just a guest here. I felt my stomach drop. Even in this new place, nothing had changed. Later that night, I heard Mom and Dad talking in hushed tones. I don't know what to do anymore, Mom sighed. I've tried everything with Sarah. Maybe we should take her to see someone, Dad suggested. A therapist or counselor? Mom agreed, and soon Sarah was going to weekly sessions. But if anything, it only made her more resentful. Oh, so now I'm crazy, she spat one day after a particularly rough appointment. You just want to fix me so precious Laura can have a perfect life. I wanted to scream that my life was far from perfect with her in it, but I kept my mouth shut. It never did any good to argue with Sarah. As the years went by, Sarah's victim complex only grew. Everything was someone else's fault, usually mine. She'd complain endlessly about how unfair her life was, how no one understood her. You're all against me, she'd say. You owe me for everything I've been through. I started avoiding her as much as possible, staying in my room or at friends' houses. Anything to escape the constant drama. When Sarah finally graduated high school and left for college in another city, it felt like the whole house breathed a collective sigh of relief. Maybe some time away will do her good, Mom said hopefully. For the first time in years, I felt like I could relax in my own home. No more walking on eggshells, no more surprise attacks of Sarah's jealousy. Those 4 years while Sarah was away at college were the happiest of my young life. I threw myself into my studies, especially art and design. I'd spend hours sketching clothes, dreaming up new styles. Mom noticed my passion and started bringing home scraps of fabric from the factory for me to play with. "You've got a real talent, Laura," she'd say, admiring my creations. For once, I felt seen for who I was, not just as Sarah's annoying little sister. I started to imagine a future where I could use my skills, maybe even in the family business. After graduation, I'd been accepted to a college in another city to study design, which was a dream come true. The night before I left for college, Mom and Dad sat me down for a talk. "We're so proud of you, Laura," Mom said, her eyes misty. "You know we support your dreams, right?" I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. Dad chimed in. "We hope that after you graduate, you'll consider coming back to work with us. Your designs could really take the company to the next level." I promised to think about it, but honestly, I was eager to spread my wings. The idea of returning to my hometown, where Sarah's shadow still loomed, wasn't exactly appealing. College life was everything I'd hoped for and more. It was during my second year that I met him. Jason. He was a few years older, working on his master's in business. We bumped into each other at a campus coffee shop, quite literally. I spilled my latte all over his shirt. We got to talking, and before I knew it, hours had passed. Jason was funny, smart, and actually listened when I talked about my designs. We started dating soon after. As graduation approached, Jason and I talked about our future. We'd been together for over 2 years by then, and things were getting serious. "I've got a job lined up here in the city," he told me one night over dinner. "What do you think about staying here? Maybe, together?" My heart soared at the idea. I'd landed a position as a junior designer at an up-and-coming fashion company, and the thought of building a life with Jason away from all the family drama was incredibly tempting. But I knew I had to tell my parents face to face. So, we planned a trip back to my hometown. I was nervous about introducing Jason to my family, especially since I knew Sarah would be there too. To my surprise, the visit went better than I could have hoped. Mom and Dad loved Jason, and even Sarah was, well, not exactly warm, but at least civil. She didn't make any snide comments or try to undermine me, which was a first. Over dinner, I broke the news about my job and my plans to stay in the city. "That's wonderful, honey," Mom said, but I could see a hint of disappointment in her eyes. Dad cleared his throat. "Actually, we had an idea we wanted to run by you. What if you opened a branch of our company in your city? You could be in charge of design, create your own line." I was stunned. It was a generous offer, one that would allow me to pursue my dreams while still being part of the family business. "Can I think about it?" I asked. They agreed, and the rest of the visit passed pleasantly. As Jason and I were leaving, Sarah pulled me aside. "Hey, I know things haven't always been great between us," she said, looking uncomfortable. "But I'd like to try and change that. Maybe I could visit you sometime?" I was skeptical, but nodded. "Sure, that'd be nice." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm after Jason and I returned from my hometown. I threw myself into my new job, learning the ropes and impressing my bosses with my designs. Jason and I started talking about marriage, looking at apartments, dreaming of our future together. Everything seemed perfect. Then, about 3 months after our visit home, I got a surprise call from Sarah. "Hey, little sis," she said, sounding oddly cheerful. "I'm in town. Mind if I crash at your place for a bit?" I nearly dropped the phone in shock. Sarah, voluntarily coming to see me? It seemed too good to be true. But I remembered her olive branch from our last meeting and decided to give her a chance. When Sarah arrived, I barely recognized her. Gone was the scowling, resentful girl I'd grown up with. This Sarah was all smiles and hugs. Over dinner that first night, she dropped a bomb on me. "I've been thinking," she said, twirling pasta on her fork. "Why don't you come back home? We could work together at the family business. It'd be great." I nearly choked on my wine. "What? But I just started my job here. And Jason?" Sarah waved her hand dismissively. "Bring him along. There's plenty of opportunity back home." I shook my head. "Thanks, but no. Actually, Mom and Dad suggested I open a branch here. I'm still considering it." For a moment, I saw a flash of the old Sarah, a tightening around her eyes, a slight downturn of her mouth. But it passed so quickly, I thought I might have imagined it. "Well, if you won't come home, maybe I could stay here a while longer?" she asked. "We've got so much catching up to do." Against my better judgment, I agreed. And to my surprise, living with Sarah wasn't the nightmare I'd expected. She was helpful, even taking over most of the household chores. We'd stay up late, talking about our childhood, laughing over shared memories. It felt like I was finally getting the sister I'd always wanted. One night, over a bottle of wine, Sarah brought up the idea of us working together again. "What if we opened that branch together?" she suggested. "You handle the design, I'll do the business side. We'd make a great team." The idea was tempting. Despite our rocky past, Sarah and I had been getting along so well. And having her business acumen could really help get the new branch off the ground. "Let me think about it," I said, not wanting to commit just yet. As the weeks passed, Jason started coming over more often. At first, I was nervous about how he and Sarah would get along, given our history. But to my relief, they seemed to hit it off. I'd come home from work to find them laughing over inside jokes, or deep in discussion about some business concept. It warmed my heart to see two important people in my life getting along so well. Jason and I set a date for our wedding, just 6 months away. I designed the invitations, carefully curated the guest list, and agonized over every detail of the menu and decorations. Sarah was there every step of the way, offering suggestions and support. Meanwhile, Jason and I had decided to open the branch of my family's company after the wedding. Sarah and I spent many evenings discussing our plans, getting more excited with each conversation. "We're going to make an amazing team," Sarah said one night, clinking her wine glass against mine. 2 months before the big day, I was juggling work, wedding prep, and future business plans. Life was hectic, but wonderful. Then came the call that changed everything. "Laura, it's Dad," his voice sounded strained over the phone. "Your mother, she's not well. She's been feeling poorly for a while, but you know your mother, always putting on a brave face." He paused, and I could hear the worry in his silence. "I'm struggling to keep up with everything, the business, the house." I didn't hesitate. "I'm coming home. Right now." When I told Sarah, she sighed. "I wish I could come with you, but I've got some important meetings I can't reschedule." I was surprised by her reluctance, but didn't push it. "It's okay. I'll keep you updated." The situation at home was worse than I'd imagined. Mom looked pale and fragile, nothing like the vibrant woman I remembered. The doctor's diagnosis was devastating, a tumor, requiring immediate surgery. I threw myself into action, taking over household chores, helping Dad with the business where I could, and most importantly, being there for Mom. I arranged to work remotely, squeezing in design work between hospital visits and home care. The days blurred together in a haze of worry and exhaustion. But finally, there was good news: the surgery was successful, and Mom was recovering well. Through it all, I tried to stay connected with Jason. We'd video chat daily at first, his face a comforting presence on my screen. "How's your mom doing?" he'd ask, his brow furrowed with concern. "Better today," I'd reply, forcing a smile. How are things there? Is Sarah behaving herself? He'd laugh and assure me everything was fine, but as the days passed, our conversations grew shorter and less frequent. I told myself it was just the stress of the situation, that things would go back to normal once I returned home. But a month into my stay, the video calls stopped altogether. My messages went unanswered. The silence was deafening. The gnawing worry in my gut wouldn't let up. After days of unanswered calls and messages, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to see Jason, to find out what was going on. I caught the next flight out, my mind racing with possibilities. Maybe Jason was sick. Maybe he'd lost his phone. Maybe. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. Some part of me wanted to surprise Jason, to see his face light up when he saw me. The silence that greeted me in my apartment was eerie. Then I heard it, a muffled giggle from the bedroom. Our bedroom. I wish I could say I hesitated, that I didn't barge in like some crazed person. But I did. And what I saw, God, I'll never forget it. Jason and Sarah. In our bed, naked and entwined. For a moment, the world stopped. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Then reality came crashing down. What the hell? I screamed, my voice breaking. They jumped apart, but neither looked particularly ashamed. If anything, they looked relieved. Laura, Sarah said, wrapping the sheet around herself. We didn't expect you back so soon. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You didn't expect? Are you kidding me? That's all you have to say? Jason at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. Sarah stood up, still clutching the sheet. Look, sis, these things happen. Jason and we're in love. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. In love? You've known each other for what, a few months? Sometimes you just know, Jason said, reaching for Sarah's hand. We didn't mean for this to happen, but... But what? I interrupted. You just accidentally fell into bed together? Sarah smiled sweetly. Laura, you should be happy for us. In fact, we were hoping you'd understand. Maybe even, let us use your wedding plans? I stared at her, uncomprehending. What? Well, everything's already paid for, she explained, as if talking to a child. It seems a shame to waste it. We could celebrate our engagement instead. I don't remember leaving the apartment. I don't remember the trip back to my parents' house. I just remember collapsing into my childhood bed, sobbing until I had no tears left. Mom and Dad found me like that. They didn't push, just sat with me until I was ready to talk. When I finally told them everything, Dad's face turned red with anger. Mom just looked sad. I'll call her, Dad said, reaching for his phone. This ends now. The conversation was short and brutal. I could hear Sarah's voice, shrill and defensive, through the speaker. Of course you're taking her side, she yelled. You always have. Well, guess what? For once, I'm the one who got chosen. How does it feel, Laura? Dad's voice was cold. Sarah, if you go through with this, you're no longer part of this family. Do you understand? There was a pause, then Sarah's voice, dripping with venom, fine. I don't need you anyway. I've got Jason now. The line went dead. Mom pulled me into a hug, her still fragile body shaking with sobs. I'm so sorry, sweetheart, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I clung to her, feeling like a little girl again. But I wasn't a little girl anymore. I was a woman who'd just had her heart ripped out by the two people she should have been able to trust most in the world. The days following the revelation of Sarah and Jason's betrayal passed in a blur. One moment, I'd be curled up in bed, unable to face the world. The next, I'd be researching lawyers, ready to sue them for every penny I'd spent on the wedding. It was during one of these angry research sessions that my phone rang. An unknown number. Hello? I answered warily. Laura? It's Margaret, Jason's mother. I nearly hung up, but something in her voice stopped me. She sounded devastated. I don't know what to say, Margaret continued. We're so sorry, dear. So very sorry. I listened in stunned silence as she poured out her heart. How shocked and disappointed they were in Jason. How they'd always thought of me as a daughter. How they couldn't believe Sarah could do this to her own sister. We want to make this right, Margaret said finally. We know it won't fix everything, but we'd like to reimburse you for all the wedding expenses. True to their word, a check arrived a few days later, covering every last expense. It was a weight off my shoulders I hadn't even realized I was carrying. As the date of what would have been my wedding approached, I made a decision. I couldn't go back to the city, not yet. There were too many memories, too much pain. Would it be okay if I stayed here for a while? I asked Mom and Dad over dinner one night. Maybe work for the company? They exchanged a look, then Dad smiled. We were hoping you'd say that. We could use your talents, especially in design. And just like that, I had a new direction. I threw myself into work with a fervor that surprised even me. Every sketch, every design, was a middle finger to Sarah and Jason. Look what you gave up, I thought bitterly. Look what you lost. The day of Sarah and Jason's wedding came and went. We didn't attend, of course. I spent the day locked in my office, working on a new line of youth clothing I'd been dreaming up. Months passed. My designs started gaining traction. The youth line was a hit, bringing in a whole new demographic of customers. Within a year, I'd helped increase the company's turnover by $1 million. Sarah and Jason? They were dead to me. I didn't think about them, didn't wonder what they were doing or if they were happy. They'd made their choice, and I'd made mine. 3 years passed in a blur of fabric swatches, design meetings, and growing success. I'd thrown myself into work, using my pain as fuel to drive our family business to new heights. Our company had become a major player in the fashion industry, and I'd made a name for myself as an innovative designer. One balmy summer evening, I was having dinner with Mom and Dad at their place. We were laughing over some silly memory when the doorbell rang. Dad frowned. Are we expecting anyone? I shook my head, a strange feeling of unease settling in my stomach. Mom went to answer the door, and suddenly the air was filled with a voice I hadn't heard in years. Well, look at this cozy family dinner, Sarah sneered, pushing past Mom into the dining room. Glad to see you're all doing so well without me. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. Sarah, what are you doing here? She looked different. Haggard, angry, with dark circles under her eyes. Oh, just thought I'd drop by, see how the other half lives, she spat. Especially now that I'm newly single. Dad's eyes narrowed. What happened to Jason? Sarah let out a bitter laugh. Turns out, once a cheater, always a cheater. He left me for his secretary. Ironic, isn't it? I felt a twinge of something, not quite sympathy, but a grim satisfaction. Karma, indeed. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, not entirely truthfully. But why are you here? Sarah's face hardened. I want what's mine, my share of the business. I'm family too, remember? Dad stood up, his voice firm. Sarah, you gave up any claim to this family and this business when you betrayed your sister. You're not getting anything. You can't do this, Sarah screamed, her composure cracking. You can't just cut me out. Mom stepped forward, her voice soft but resolute. We already have, Sarah. You're disinherited. Please leave. For a moment, I thought Sarah might lash out physically. But instead, she just glared at us all, her eyes burning with hatred. This isn't over, she hissed, before storming out. A few days later, I was in my office when I heard a commotion from the lobby. I rushed down to find Sarah in the middle of our workspace, screaming at the top of her lungs. You're all being deceived, she yelled at our bewildered employees. My parents are unscrupulous liars. They've stolen what's rightfully mine. I didn't hesitate. I called the police, keeping my voice calm, despite the chaos around me. We need officers at fashion-forward designs immediately. We have an unstable individual causing a disturbance. Even as security tried to remove her, Sarah kept fighting. Over the next few days, she escalated her attacks, trying to break into our parents' house, smashing windows, and in a final, terrifying act, attempting to set fire to the front door. It was clear this couldn't go on. With heavy hearts, we took legal action, obtaining a restraining order that banned Sarah from approaching me, our parents, or any of our properties. As I sat in my office after the court hearing, looking out over the city I'd come to love, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Sadness for the sister I'd lost, anger at her actions, but also pride in how far I'd come. I was now a respected entrepreneur and fashion designer, my name known throughout the industry. Love? That could wait. The wounds from Jason's betrayal had healed, but I wasn't ready to risk my heart again. Not yet. For now, I was content to pour my passion into my designs, into building something lasting and beautiful.